I will make my dwelling among you, and my soul shall not abhor you. And I will walk among you, and will be your God, and you shall be my people. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, that you should not be their slaves. And I have broken the bars of your yoke and made you walk erect.
Snow is falling on the avenue, lights are shining red and blue. Every song on the radio feels like it's calling me back to you. Got my suitcase by the door, hearts I've missed, can't wait no more. There's magic in the air tonight, I'm heading home where it feels so right. I'm coming home at Christmas time, to hugs and laughter, love divine. The fire's warm, the stars all shine. I'm coming home, it's Christmas time. Friends and family gathered near, the joy I've waited for all year. There's no place I'd rather be. I'm coming home for Christmas Eve. City streets are trimmed in gold, stories shared and hands to hold, memories wrapped up in a bowl of Christmas past so long ago. Hear the choir down the lane, singing peace on earth again. Every heart beats in rhyme, love's the reason it's Christmas time. I'm coming home at Christmas time, to hugs and laughter, love divine. The fire's warm, the stars all shine. I'm coming home, it's Christmas time. Friends and family gathered near, the joy I've waited for all year. There's no place I'd rather be. I'm coming home for Christmas Eve.
I was about 13. I'd hit my growth spurt. And two different people moved into the neighborhood. The first people were from a different culture altogether. Different culture. They were Koreans, and they were living up the street from us. And so they were just a little bit younger than me, like 11, 12, you know. And I just found the culture fascinating. So, you know, go in the house and you take off your shoes. Well, they took my shoes, and they were learning English. And they took my shoes and they said, boat. Boat. This is a boat. And it was just fascinating. But the other people that moved in, you know, because when you're a guy and, you know, my life was The Sandlot. Watch The Sandlot. That's me growing up. You know, you want to know, okay, what kids are there? And you also want to know is what sport can they play? And so Martin moved. Our backyards almost touched. And Martin looked like me, but Martin didn't talk like me. Martin had a British accent, you know, and his mom and dad, they all talked funny. They talked funny. We just wanted to know, what sport can you play? And so we would do, you know, things were different. Food was a little bit different, and we would talk. So this would have been 1973, 1972, somewhere along in there. People move into the neighborhood, and the neighborhood changes. You know, if they moved in, just a husband and wife, and they didn't have any kids, you know, what we would say, there goes the neighborhood, you know. If this keeps up and people move in here without any kids, how are we going to play ball? You know, that's what we were concerned about. But Christ does something like that. Christ moved in to our neighborhood. Christ, from the promises that God made about, I'm going to dwell with you, in Leviticus that Allison just read, God's people have been delivered. He had them, the promises He had given them in Genesis didn't look like they were going to come to fruition. He promised them a land, a people, a culture, and it didn't look like that was going to come through. In fact, there was a point in time where they had lost all sense of that. They had lost all sense of their worship, how they would worship. They weren't, every day was like every other day. There was no distinction. There was no Sabbath. There was nothing for them to look forward to. Slavery was their lot in life. And God steps in and God delivers them. Like God gives them that promise that Allison read. It became tangible. It became more than a promise a little later. Actually, this was written before that, but it gives us a picture. If you look in Exodus chapter 40, the very end of Exodus, it leaves us with a picture, and here's what it says. And I'm just going to pick 2 verses here. We could read the whole thing, but then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. God had told them, make this tabernacle, make this tent. And I'm going to come and I'm going to dwell in this tent. And I'm going to be a cloud by day. You will know my presence by the presence of this cloud over this tent by day, and a fire by night. And so he goes on, and here's the way he ends this. For the cloud of the Lord was on the tabernacle by day, and the fire was in it by night, in the sight of all of the house of Israel throughout all their journeys. They knew, they had a tangible expression that God's promises, when He said, I'm going to be with you, I'm going to dwell with you. They could look right there and say, that's God fulfilling His promise. And then we waited. They waited. They got into the land, and they did great in the land. They had made promises. They said, if we act this way, then God, you have every right to cast us out of the land. And as their history shows, they broke that trust, that promise with God. And they were cast out. They were exiled. We looked at that a little bit last week. That we were exiled, not only they exiled out of the land, but we were exiled out of the garden. And how would we get back? How would we get back home? How would we get back to that place where we're in right relationship with God and we're in right relationship with each other? And maybe, as important as all of those, that we're right relationship with ourselves. We don't wrestle with ourselves. Well, God does something, and He knew that we could not get to Him, so He came to us. I want you to look at the way John says this in a verse. John chapter 1 says this. And the word, the idea, this concept he talks about, the word that was in the very beginning, the word became flesh and dwelt among us. That word dwelt among us is a funny word because it's the exact same idea as what we just read in Exodus chapter 40. It's not the exact same word, but it's a weird word. It's a different word. He pitched His tent among us. He tabernacled among us. The Word became flesh and He tabernacled among us. And we have seen His glory, glory as the only Son from the Father, full of grace and full of truth. God sends Jesus to tabernacle among us. Eugene Peterson, in his paraphrase called The Message, he puts it this way, that God became flesh and He moved into the neighborhood. He moved into our neighborhood. And He did that because He knew that we could not pretend to be good enough. We could not act to be good enough. We could not possibly be good enough. He's going to come to us because we couldn't come to Him. And to just give you a little bit more of this concept, in Philippians chapter 2 talks about this. It talks about Jesus being somewhere else and coming to where we are. Paul is writing the Philippian church. He's telling them you don't need to argue. You don't need to bicker amongst each other. You don't need to say, hey, I'm better than you. And because the church was very diverse in those early years. It's made up of Romans, of Greeks, of Jews, of Gentiles. It was made up of different people in different social status. And he says, have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus. He said, the only way you can think like this, the only way you can think like the way that I'm writing about in this book of Philippians so that you can have full joy, is to be in Christ and have this mind. Have the same mind that Christ had, who, though He was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, a thing to be held on to. But He emptied Himself. And how did He do that? By taking the form of a servant. By being born in the likeness of men. And being found in human form, coming and tabernacling among us, pitching His tent in our neighborhood, He humbled Himself by becoming obedient. How far did His obedience go? His obedience went so far as death, even death on a cross. So Jesus does this thing. He moves into our neighborhood. God says, I don't want to live without you. And because I know you can't get to me, you can't possibly do enough things to get to me, I'm going to come to you. And I'm going to make my home among you. Among yourselves and among ourselves is where He makes His home. It's the promise in the Old Testament. It's a promise in the New Testament. It's fulfilled. He even shows us the mechanics of that. And why does He do this? He does it because He loves us. I put it this way. Love always moves closer. Love is the one that initiates moving closer. This week, Gail and I were at the thrift store. Where else would we be but the thrift store? And in there, I'm looking, and I see somebody I haven't seen in a year in person. We've communicated, but it's been about a year. And their grandson was at the point of death, just about 10 years old, at the very point of death. We'd sent out prayer requests, and how do you think they handled the relationship and the distance that stood between them? Did they say, well, we're going to wait right here at home, and, as soon as he gets better, he'll come to us? If you'd have gone up there in that intensive care unit where he was, where that little boy was staying, you know what you'd have seen? Family. You'd have seen family. You'd have seen family praying. You'd have seen family there praying and there. Because what happens? Love always moves to the hurting. Love always moves to that place that needs it most. Love is always the first mover. God and Jesus is the first mover towards us. He moves into our neighborhood. He takes up residency in our neighborhood. And he does it, his standards are pretty low when you think about it. In fact, here's the way the Bible in Micah tells us this. This was a promise in the Old Testament. Because where would that neighborhood take place? But you, O Bethlehem, Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah. You're just insignificant, Bethlehem. You're just too small. From you shall come forth from me one who is to be a ruler in Israel. One coming forth is from ancient days. He comes to the insignificant places, to the seemingly forgotten people, to the insignificant people. And he moves in. And that's where he comes. Geography didn't stop him. Also time. He came at the right time. He moved into our neighborhood at just the right time. Here's the way Galatians will put this. Galatians talks about it this way. But when the fullness of time had come, and this concept, especially in the Old Testament, you can look as far back in the book of Genesis, God promised that He was going to do something at the fullness of time. When the time, it's like an hourglass and you turn it over. When that time is complete, God knows something, and when that time is complete, He moves. And He says, when the fullness of time had come, when it was just the right time, God sent forth His Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, so that we might receive the adoption as sons. God came at just the right time to bring us into His family. Now, from a practical standpoint, this right time had everything to do with where we were as a humanity. One time, one of my professors in college, Dr. Green, he didn't believe anything in the Bible or anything, and I can remember he took 3 days, 3 class sessions to do this lecture about how humanity was at one point, and he was giving evidence for that. And then we sunk down to another point at our lowest point in humanity, and now we're on the rise again. He would use things like they've discovered skulls, in South America that have been operated on, and it's evident from the evidence that the person lived. So we knew humanity was operating at a higher level. He did all of that, and when he said the lowest point, and he was drawing this out historically, it hit me. That was when Jesus came. Jesus came at the lowest point. Jesus came at the point, at the time and place, so He wouldn't leave anybody behind. If they were left behind, it was for their own choosing. So Jesus comes to our neighborhood. He pitches His tent. He does that because love always moves first. And when He does that, because when someone's hurting, you move toward them. And He knew we were desperate. He knew in our heart of hearts we were desperate to have that reunion. We were desperate to get back, to get connected back to Him. And so He moves. He moves to insignificant places. He moves in times that we're sitting there and we're thinking, well, Jesus doesn't want to be bothered with this. What is your Jesus doesn't want to be bothered with? Jesus doesn't want to be bothered with my grades. Really? Jesus doesn't want to be bothered with my job. Really? Jesus doesn't want to be bothered with my finances. Not sure about that. Jesus doesn't want to be bothered with my physical ailment. Jesus doesn't want to be concerned, and you just name it. Christmas tells a very different story. Christmas tells a story that God hears us, and He knows our hurts, and He knows it even before we know it. You know, it's funny, my newest grandson, Olivia, is very attentive to him. And Olivia can almost tell before he knows that he's hungry. Oh, it's time to eat. She can anticipate that. God does that so much more. God knows our hurts. God can deal with an unfavorable diagnosis, health diagnosis. He knows that. And instead of saying, no, this is too much trouble, I don't want to come here, He moves in closer. He moves in closer because love always moves to where the hurt is. And why does He do that? He does that because what He's doing is He brings light into a neighborhood. He brings light to a person. And then here's the neat thing that happens. What happens to that light? It ends up going out to the hospital. It ends up going out to the place where you work. Well, I didn't bring the light in there. Oh, yes, you did. Yes, you did. When you came into that place and you were frustrated and you were dealing with something and God was right there and you have no idea. Sometimes we get this idea that it's got to be, we've got to live perfect Christian lives, whatever that means. I'm not sure what that means at all. But when people see us hurting and they see who we trust in and we see our confidence, because even though we can't see the cloud or the fire, we know His promise, and God has already proved He was tangible. When Christ came, He came and He lived a normal life. He didn't live in a palace. He lived in a regular home. He had a job as a teenager. It's funny, you might have seen on Facebook, I put on my page, somebody had posted an article from the newspaper, and it had my mother in 1958. Mom was 18, just about turning 19 years old, because I was asking her, and they said, here's Norma Epps. And I said, Mom, how old were you? She said, I was 18. She said, Daddy put us to work when we were 14. We had to go and we had to work, and so she was working at the Roses 5 and Dime. Isn't it interesting how my mom at 18 looked like she was like 30 or so? You know, I'm just saying. You look at all those, you know, you that were born back then, it's like y'all were adults. Like at 13 years old, you were adults. But do you think Jesus operated any differently? Do you think Joseph said, "Oh, Jesus, you just wait right there. I'll put your younger brothers and sisters to work. You just stay right there because we don't want anything to happen to Jesus." He said, Jesus, get over here. Pick up this water. Come bring this water over here. Come on, I want to teach you how to be a carpenter. When Jesus moved into the neighborhood, He moved in so He could identify with us. He moved in because He wanted to get close to us. And He still does. He still wants to get close to us. And sometimes the only way He can get close to us, through all the busyness, through all the things we're doing, sometimes the only way He can get close to us is to have us stop for a moment and have us become frustrated. And have our world kind of rock, and we say, oh, time out. Maybe I need to invite God into this relationship. Maybe I need to invite God into this career. Maybe I need to let God come into this parenting relationship. Maybe, just maybe, as Jesus moved into the neighborhood, maybe Jesus wants to do more than just move there and be a nice picture. Maybe He wants to get in and do some real work. Maybe He wants to change the entire game. And that's what Christmas is. It's realizing that He moved into our neighborhood, but He didn't just move in so He would have the one house in the neighborhood that's pretty. He moved in so He could do something in our house. And that's why we decorate. That's why we celebrate. You can look at a dozen Hallmark movies and you say, well, wait, what's the meaning of Christmas now? Because He wants to do something really, really deep. He wants to come alongside and do something really special in our lives. And this promise not only is for now, it's for forever. I want you to look at Revelation, the book of Revelation. At the end of the Bible, this book of books, and I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man." God comes to live where we are. He will dwell with them, and they will be His people. And God Himself will be with them as their God. That's the promise. That's the promise that God acted so that He can live with us forever. He can live with us forever. Home comes to us. It's not something that we have to work for. It's not something we have to pretend and got to clean up our lives in a certain way to make ourselves presentable. He will handle that. But He comes to us, and the reason He does that, just like the Gillum's little grandson in the hospital, because He knows we can't come to Him. We're deficient. We're hurting. We've got the hang-ups. And He comes to us. And grace is about saying yes to that. Be at home right here. Let's pray. Father, I pray that we would welcome You into our homes, welcome You into our lives, welcome You into our relationships. Father, I pray we would welcome You into our health concerns, that we would realize that You desire to move into every aspect of our lives and transform it. Transform it to be a reflection of Your love and Your goodness. May this holiday we truly allow You to be at home in our lives. For it's in Christ's name I pray. Amen.